Hello, welcome to another Silverbird Selection game review. Before we get on to this review, let me just remind you about the fact that at the end of each game review now, you get the option to choose from one of two games that I'll play next time around. Thank you to everyone who's voted for the next game that I'll play in my last video, and I'll be revealing what that game is and playing it very soon, of course. That vote is now closed though, as I am now doing my next video. So this time around we're going to look at a retro gaming compilation on a retro gaming system. It is of course Arcade Classics, compilation of 4 games released in the Silver Range packaging in 1987. Very common game to find on eBay. My copy cost me £2.49, although you can probably get it for a little bit less than that if you shop around or wait long enough. So let's get on with the game review. 4 games to look at and of course the packaging. So let's get on with it. Quite an interesting front cover on this one. You've got the big Arcade Classics logo done in 2 different styles there. The nice big gold classics and the less than impressive white text for the arcade there. And then you've got a kind of overhead view of the 4 arcade machines for the 4 games that are included in this compilation, with some kind of creatures all sort of exploding out of them, I suppose. It's not the greatest front cover, but it's quite an interesting one. Spine's got the Arcade Classics logo on as well, and then the back cover has got a picture of the 4 arcade machines as a screenshot, and also a screenshot of the classic Space Invaders. And the info there says 4 for the price of 1, give your Commodore a thrill overdose. And as you can see there, this one won a silver medal from Zap, which means it scored 90% or more. And inside we've got the usual list of games available in the Silver Range, which by this point seems to be quite extensive. Got the mail order info, which we'll skip past quickly, and you've got Arcade Classics copyright 1987 Ubik, presumably that's the name of the programmer. Bit of blurb about the game, reliving those great moments of arcade hysteria with these 4 great blasts from the past: Space Invaders, Snakes, Asteroids and Space Wars are covered there in this astounding compilation, it says. And some loading instructions as always, and then gameplay. You've basically got pretty much basic instructions for the 4 games along with the controls. Very elaborate description though for Asteroids. It says your Thracian fighter craft is entrapped by the interplanetary asteroid belt between Sirius 5 and Sirius 6. Probably a little bit too much backstory for a game that's basically just Asteroids. As you can see there, there's also instructions for Snakes and Space War, and various keyboard controls for the different games. You can also play with a joystick, although it doesn't really mention that other than at the top there. So the game loads and you're presented with this screen, which you saw on the back of the cover of the game, and it allows you to pick from the 4 arcade machines: Space Invaders, Asteroids, Snakes and Space Wars, by moving the joystick left and right and highlighting this big glowing box around the machine that you want to play. Interestingly, if you go between 2 of the games like this, between Asteroids and Snakes, and press fire, you don't get either of them, which is a bit odd. Makes you wonder why it didn't just kind of move straight from outlining one machine to another. So the representation of the machines is quite nice, although Asteroids doesn't look anything like the Asteroids arcade machine. Space Invaders is pretty close. Snakes and Space Wars I'm not too sure about. I'm not even sure there was actually a Snakes arcade game in the form that we're seeing it here, but who knows. So yeah, it's quite nicely done. Nice sort of neon arcade logo across the top there, nicely presented. So let's work our way through the 4 different games. Before I do that though, just mention the music in the background is another Rob Hubbard tune. Quite a nice one with a sort of electric guitar kind of sound to it, and a sort of pounding drum beat as well. So let's start by going to Space Invaders, and you can see it's a pretty good representation of the Space Invaders arcade game title screen, including the little bit where the invader comes along and shoots the Y on the end of the play, although it's not a Y actually. He brings the Y in there, as you can see, so that's quite a nice touch. To avoid any copyright infringement, it seems to be called Invaders rather than Invaders. So let's get on with the game. And you all know how to play Space Invaders, so this is all about just how good a representation of the game it is. It's not too bad. The graphics are a bit more blocky than... Oh, lost a life already. The graphics are a bit more blocky than the original Space Invaders arcade machine, but otherwise it's a pretty close representation of the game, I think. The sounds are pretty authentic as well. The UFO is very large and very difficult to shoot. It goes across the top of the screen very quick. And the sounds of the invaders moving left and right are quite convincing. The sound of the shots not so much. So obviously you know how to play Space Invaders. You shoot all the invaders before they get to the bottom of the screen and you move on to the next level and repeat ad infinitum, or until you die. Oh, lost another life. Missed a chance to shoot the UFO there as well, again. It's not going too well, really. So yeah, the biggest criticism would be that the UFO is very hard to shoot. It goes across the screen very quickly. There we go, there's one level completed. See if I can do a bit better on this level without losing 2 lives. But there's very little else to say about it. It's Space Invaders. I'm not... Oh, I got shot there. I was going after the UFO. Is that game over? It is game over. But it's Space Invaders. It's not a bad version of it. It's quite authentic. I'm not going to play it again. Let's move on to the second game. So you go back to the menu by pressing the restore button. Let's move on to game number 2, which is Asteroids. Or Rocks in Space as it's known here, again to avoid any copyright infringement presumably. So you've got all the controls listed on the screen there, and also the points that you score. It's got a high score table as well. So let's get on with a game of this, and again it's pretty reasonable representation of asteroids, although the asteroids are massive and I've got hit by one and lost a life straight away. So you can move around with the joystick, you can hyperspace by pressing the space bar, but I'm not going to bother too much with that. Left and right rotation, and fire to fire, and up, oh god, there goes another life, and up thrusts. So yeah, the problem here is the asteroids move really quickly, almost immediately, which is hard to avoid, as you can see, and also they take up a lot of screen space, as does your ship, so avoiding stuff is quite difficult. If you break a couple of asteroids into the smaller ones very quickly, then it's a real challenge to avoid them. So after losing a couple of lives early on, I've sort of got to grips with it a little bit more. The other problem is you only shoot a maximum of 2 bullets, which makes it difficult when you fire them. Until they disappear off the screen, you can't shoot anymore. Oh, there goes another life. Not an expert demonstration of how to play asteroids, but it is quite difficult to do. You do get the UFOs coming across the screen eventually, as you can see. There goes another life. They're very hard to kill, and that's game over. Didn't go well again. I'll be honest, it's not the greatest version of Asteroids I've ever played. The size of the asteroids is the real problem there. But graphically it's not a bad representation. Obviously you don't get the glow of the vectors like you would in a real game of Asteroids. I don't know what I'm doing now, I just put some alien icon. Oh my god, I've made a mess putting my name in. There we go, that'll do. So there you go, that was Asteroids. The graphics are quite nice, the sound effects are reasonable, but the gameplay struggles a bit. It's very hard because how fast they move and also how big all the asteroids are on the screen. They definitely occupy a lot more screen real estate than they do in the original arcade version. So let's move on to game number 3. If I can get back to the title screen. There we go, to hit restore quite hard it seems. So game number 3 is Snakes. or Worm Wars as it's called here. I'm not even sure Snake is a copyright, but there you go. So you've got a lot of options here again. Good presentation, you've got the scoring details, you've got the controls, although only for one of the two players. This is a two-player only game. You can also alter the time limit by moving left and right. You can see that changing at the top of the screen there. So I'm just going to put that to 150, which I think is roughly seconds, because as you'll see from this game, it's two-player only. So player 2 is the red snake, which is just moving from right to left across the screen, wrapping around. As you can see, the screen wraps around. And as you'll know by playing Snake, the idea is to collect things to increase the length of the snake. There's one of them there that I've just picked up. You also get the points for whatever that is, and your snake is extended by the number of points that item represented. In this version of the game, it's kind of a cross between Snake and also the Tron Light Cycle game, because the other aim of the game is to make the other snake crash into you. But if you don't time it right, the snake actually eats the end of your snake, which is what happened there. So let's try and get it right this time. As you can see, their snake's grown, and now I've made it crash into me. So I earn 20 points every time I can get the other snake to crash into me. You get the points for collecting the items that appear on the screen. You can also, as I've mentioned, take the end off the opposing snake, as I did there, and get more points. So that's quite an interesting touch, which would be good if you were playing two-player, but I'm not playing two-player, so it's a bit of a one-sided sort of an affair. You can also crash into yourself by moving around quickly enough like that, which gives the opposing player 20 points. So even though I'm the only player playing, I could theoretically lose if I got crashed into myself, or I crash into the opposing snake enough times. It's now actually even points. The background on this is horrendous. It's like some zeros that just kind of swirl around, and it's really off-putting and makes your eyes hurt. The snakes themselves are quite nicely done, nice and glowing, not very amazing looking sprites by any means. It's sort of ASCII text almost, but they work quite nicely and they're quite colourful. So as a two-player game, I think this will be quite good. As a one-player game, clearly it's not great, and there's no option for playing against a computer, so there's no chance to use the computer AI to play against. Unfortunately, there is no computer AI to play against, in fact. So I've got 28 seconds left. I'll just let the time run out. There's not much more to say about this one. It's Snake crossed with the Tron Light Cycles, which would be a nice idea if you could play it two-player, but you can't. Sorry, if you could play against a computer, but you can't. So all I can do is continue until the time runs out, which is nearly there. Try and eat the end off the snake. Oh, I've run into myself there. In the end, we'll get the game over screen where it says time's up, player 1 is the winner. And it goes back to the menu, which will then allow us to exit and see the final of the 4 games, which is Space Wars. Now again, this one's packed with options. You can select the gravity strength of none, small, medium or large. We'll start with none. You can also select the gravity direction. We'll leave as normal because I've done no gravity anyway. And also whether it's a bordered or wraparound universe. And finally you can set the time limit, which I'll make low for the same reasons as before, which is that you're playing against a second player, which in the case of this game I haven't got. There's no one sitting with me. There's no chance to play against the computer. So as you can see, the options I've selected allow my ship to bounce off the walls. This is of course a version of Space War, one of the very first video games as developed by the guys at MIT in the 60s. Very good version of it on the Vectrex. This version is not too bad. You've got the red and blue spaceship, but the problem with it is, other than the fact that you can only play two-player, is that it's really fast to move the ship around. If you crash into the sun, by the way, you die and the opposition gets a point. Obviously the idea really is to fly around, oh dear, and not crash into the sun. The idea is to fly around and shoot the opposing spaceship. Again, like Asteroids, which obviously reuses some of the graphics from, you can only, I don't know what's going on now, I can't rotate my spaceship. You can only shoot a couple of shots at the same time. It's obviously oh god, I'm making a right mess of this. I'm just trying to get down there to shoot the opposition ship, and it's becoming very difficult to do that. There we go, finally got it. And that's what happens when you do it. So again, not much playability out of this one unless you've got a second player, and player 2 actually won there because I crashed into the sun so many times. So I'll just play that again once it goes back to the menu. You can see my ship being sucked into the sun there, which is a bit laborious when you're just waiting for the game to end and play again. So I'll show you some of the other options there. We'll go for gravity small, reverse gravity, wrap around universe, keep the time limit fairly low again. So let's see how the game plays with these different options. So now you can see as I approach the sun it kind of deflects me away from it, which makes this quite an interesting game mode, or it would be if I got someone to play against. As it is, I haven't, and so I've just got to try and shoot them. You see you can't crash into them, you can only shoot them, and shooting them is actually quite difficult, as you'll have seen from the previous playthrough and this one too. Actually, now I'm not sure what's happened, but my ship's kind of stopped moving. I can't thrust or rotate, so I think there's a bit of a bug in this game as well. You can see I almost hit the sun then, and it just deflected me at the last second, and again there. So I'm kind of stuck now until I can drift past the other ship and shoot it. But actually shooting it is quite difficult. The bullets don't seem to connect with it. Oh, finally managed to do it, it looks like. So yeah, I'll just try and play through this, but it's not the best version of Space War. The ship's quite fast, hard to control. Also, there seems to be the bug where you lose control of it completely. Crashed into the sun that time. But the most difficult part is actually shooting the opposing ship. Is really quite hard to do. Now my movement's gone again. Also, don't fire many bullets, as I mentioned, so it's quite hard to get a stream of bullets going against the opposition ship. All in all, it's a bit disappointing, to be honest. If it was 2 players, might be better, or if you could play against a computer, but overall it's not that great. So in summary, you've got 4 games of varying degrees of quality. It's nicely presented, there's no arguing with that. In terms of the games, we'll go through them individually in a minute, but let's start with looking at the packaging. I'm going to give the packaging 7 out of 10. I think the instructions are very detailed for sure. The front cover image is unusual, but I quite like it anyway, and there's some nice images on the back cover. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for the packaging. Presentation I think was excellent. Across the board you've got this nice sort of game selection screen at the front, and then you've got all the instructions with the keyboard controls for the games within each game when you go into it. You've got high scores or high score tables on most of them as well. Lots of options on Space Wars as well, although it's not a particularly good game. There are certainly lots of game options, so I'm going to go with 9 out of 10 for the presentation. Graphics are a bit variable. You know, you're not going to get amazing graphics on recreations of games from the late 70s anyway, but they do the job across the board. But I think overall I can only give them a 6 out of 10. Sound is pretty decent. You've got the good music from Rob Hubbard, which is also the background music for 2 of the 4 games, and then for the other 2 games, Space Invaders and Asteroids, you've got reasonably authentic recreation of the sounds from those games as well. So 7 out of 10 for the sound. And then you come to playability, and well, you've got 4 games. What you've got is a good version of Space Invaders, but it's not a particularly great game. It's quite a boring game nowadays. Space Invaders is a classic, but not really that much fun to play. Then you've got Asteroids, which is a reasonable version of a good game, but actually it's not that good, not that playable. It's a bit too hard, and everything moves a bit too quickly, and all the graphics are a little bit too large, so it's too easy to crash into stuff. So an average version of a good game, I would say. Snakes is probably the best of the 4 games. It's got quite good variety with the cross between playing Snake and also the Tron Light Cycle game, but obviously you can't play against a computer, so that's a bit of a downfall for that one. And then Space Wars, which we did last, wasn't great. It's buggy and also hard to play, hard to shoot the opposing ship. So I'm going to go overall with a playability score of 6 out of 10. That gives an overall score for the game of 7.5, which is a bit less than what Zap gave it, which was a Sizzler rating. I think it was around 90%. Silver medal, sorry, not a Sizzler. So I don't think it was as good as that, but it's definitely a playable compilation. And in terms of value for money, you can't really argue. 4 games for $1.99 is good value for money, so I'd definitely say it was worth that. So if you've played arcade classics in the past, or you've got any opinions on these games, either the originals or these recreations of them, then let me know in the comments. And I'll be back with another game in a few days' time, which will be a game that you've helped me choose. Okay then, so that's the review of Arcade Classics completed. Time now for you to help me choose the next game I review. Well, technically not the next game, but the next game after the next game. So, 2 options again. This time we're looking at 2 Silverbird packaging games, both re-releases, because I haven't done a review of a re-release on the Silverbird packaging yet. So, here are your choices. You can either choose Cauldron or Fighter Pilot. So, leave me a comment and let me know which one of these 2 games you'd like me to play most. And I'll play it not next time, but the time after. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Leave any comments about the game or the games you want me to play next, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.